delivery girl Sophie accidentally hides beneath a stranger's legs to escape her ex, only to discover he's the powerful CEO of a tech empire. One reckless move unlocks the door to a world she never imagined, where the line between chaos and love is far thinner than she ever expected. Sophie Miller hadn't planned to run that day. She'd only intended to deliver food like always, receive a half-hearted thank you, and return to her cramped, rented room. But a pair of worn-out sneakers, a red backpack, and a fearful heart, they led her to a moment no one could have scripted. She stepped into the building's lobby at a pace just slow enough to avoid sweating. The place was dazzling, luxurious to the point that her hoodie felt like an intruder. Just drop off the order and leave, she told herself, eyes fixed ahead, dodging every glance. But the first person she ran into was the last one she ever wanted to see. Derek. "Sophie?" His voice cut through her fragile shield like a dagger. "Wait, how long are you going to keep avoiding me?" She didn't wait to hear more. Her hand tightened around her backpack strap, her heart pounding wildly. Derek, her obsessive ex, the one who'd left her crying for 3 months, was here of all places? No. Impossible. She turned and ran, driven by instinct or desperation. Sophie darted down the left hallway. She just needed to get out of his sight, just needed a place to disappear. And then, she spotted a man standing by a long table, his eyes glued to a tablet. White dress shirt, navy vest, a posture that screamed untouchable. She didn't think, she just acted. She slid across the floor, slipped between his legs, and curled up like a child hiding behind a door. "Please, pretend you don't see me," she whispered, her forehead nearly brushing his trousers. He froze. So did Sophie. She could feel her ragged breathing, her heartbeat blurring the line between fear and the absurdity of what she'd just done. "He's always stalking me. He's a creep. I know this is weird, but please help me just 30 seconds, she said, glancing up to meet the man's eyes. It wasn't anger or annoyance she saw. It was surprise, caution, and then something else. He gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging that this was indeed happening. Footsteps echoed. Derek appeared at the hallway's entrance. "Sorry, have you seen a girl, red backpack, running this way?" he asked. The man stood there, calm as ever, and replied. She ran toward the stairs. Looked like she was in a hurry. Derek nodded, no suspicion in his eyes, and walked off. Sophie exhaled, her whole body slumping in relief. As the footsteps faded, she slowly emerged from her hiding spot. Looking up, she met the man's gaze again, this time curious but not cold. "Sorry, I know I seem like a lunatic, but it was an emergency, a survival tactic, like something out of a movie," she stammered, adjusting her shirt. "More like an experimental film," he replied, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. She smiled, half embarrassed, half relieved. Sophie Miller, part-time delivery driver, full-time unemployed. Ethan Walker, CEO. And now, apparently, an impromptu hiding spot? Sophie froze. Ethan Walker, the name plastered across business headlines. The reclusive CEO, founder of a blockbuster tech company. And she'd just slid between his legs. Great. Fantastic. I'm officially a legend, in the worst way possible. Relax. I've had weirder meetings. Sure, but no one's ever used you as an emotional barricade. That's a first. A silence stretched between them. Then Ethan tilted his head, studying her like she was something intriguing. "You said you're unemployed full-time?" "Yeah. I've applied everywhere, but I'm stuck in that loop. Too experienced for entry level, not experienced enough for anything real." Ethan handed her his tablet. "I need a temporary assistant, someone sharp enough to survive under a table. Interested?" Sophie blinked. "Are you serious?" "Office 1706, tomorrow. You've got 90 days to prove you're more than just good at hiding." She looked at him, this man standing in the hallway with an uncanny calm, and smiled despite herself. "Deal? But if I run into Derek again tomorrow, you won't fire me, right?" I'll give you a keycard and coffee machine privileges. That's already a promotion. The next morning, Sophie stood in the glass elevator of the Walker Tech building, gripping the strap of her canvas bag, her heart racing beyond her control. She wore her only unwrinkled blouse, simple jeans, and a pair of shoes clean enough not to embarrass her. But no matter how much she tidied herself up, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was an outsider stepping into a world not meant for her. "What am I even doing?" she whispered to herself as the elevator mirror reflected her half-excited, half-panicked expression. Yesterday she'd hidden between a CEO's legs. Today she was heading to an interview, or rather a trial run, at his company. When the doors to the 17th floor slid open, a realm of glass and steel greeted her. Everything gleamed, quiet yet buzzing with an impressive pace. People moved without rushing, but without hesitation either. They were like characters from a sci-fi movie, and she felt like a misplaced side story scribbled in by mistake. "Good morning. I'm Sophie Miller. Mr. Walker is expecting me." "Yes, Miss Miller. He's waiting in his office." The receptionist replied with a smile, showing no hint of surprise, as if the CEO hiring an assistant who'd crawled under a table was just another day around here. Ethan's office wasn't what she'd expected. No massive wooden desk or power wall lined with awards. Instead, it was soft light, a glass desk, faint holographic screens, and a swivel chair that looked so comfortable it almost seemed out of place. Ethan stood by the window, white shirt pristine, a coffee cup in hand. He turned, his expression calm, as if her presence was something he'd long grown used to. "You made it." I'm still not sure if this is reality or a dream that smells like roasted coffee," Sophie replied, offering a small smile. He gestured for her to sit. "I need someone to assist, not the MBA 3 years of experience type, but someone who can act in chaos. Someone who'll move even when they're not sure they're right. You impressed me by hiding under my feet, but then you stayed composed, lied convincingly, and didn't over-apologize. That's a skill set you don't see often. And that makes me want to find out." Sophie gave a light laugh. "I studied design once, but dropped out to take care of my mom. After that, I've done everything. Delivery, proofreading, wedding catering, even played a fake bride for a dress rehearsal event. Sounds like a chaotic resume. Or a versatile one?" Ethan nodded, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "You've got 3 months. Trial contract. I need real help. Scheduling meetings, tracking progress, facing the chaos tech creates. You don't need to know everything, just don't be afraid to dive in." Sophie eyed the thin contract on the table. She couldn't remember the last time she'd signed something with a pen. Maybe a delivery slip. Maybe a rejected job application. But this paper, it felt different. "And if I fail? Then at least we'll have an interesting story. And if I succeed? Then I'll have to get used to an assistant who doesn't fit the mold." She laughed, her hand trembling but resolute as she signed her name. "Guess I just stepped into a very different world." Ethan took the contract back, setting his pen down like he was sealing a historic deal. "Welcome to organized chaos, Miss Miller." Sophie couldn't pinpoint when Ethan's gaze started to unravel her focus. Maybe it was when he gave that faint smile after she saved a meeting by rebooting the system, accidentally opening a top-secret folder in the process. Or perhaps it was when he leaned over to hand her a glass of orange juice in the stuffy office without a word, only to watch her drink as if studying the reaction of some distant celestial body. Or maybe it was that moment in the elevator, stuck between floors 18 and 19, when a glitch left them suspended in a glass box mid-air. "I'm not good with tight spaces," she admitted, trying to breathe evenly. "I'm not good with any space that has other people," Ethan replied, and then they laughed. Not loudly, not boisterously, but enough to chip away at the invisible divide between a CEO and the girl who'd once hidden under his table. Days passed. Sophie learned to handle calls from foreign partners, even if she mispronounced the company name 3 times. She figured out how to tackle complex spreadsheets with skills picked up from YouTube and Google. She mastered reading Helena, the laser-eyed planning manager, to know when to stay quiet and when she could crack a joke. And Ethan, once a man of charts, deadlines, and forecasts, began to notice the lipstick Sophie wore every Monday, the way she brewed coffee strong yet sweet, and how she always wrote her to-do lists in purple ink. They never spoke of the shift between them, but things changed subtly. Lunch in the meeting room stopped feeling like an obligation. Sometimes he waited for her to step out of the elevator with him, though neither acknowledged it. Once, she accidentally left her earbuds behind, and the next day he returned them with a handwritten note. Decent music. Leave the playlist next time. Then came the time during a meeting with international clients when the presentation system froze. Tension filled the room. Ethan stayed silent. Sophie stepped forward, fixed the connection, and accidentally projected an unannounced experimental interface design onto the screen. No one breathed. But then something unexpected happened. One of the guests expressed genuine excitement. The meeting pivoted. Ethan, rather than reprimanding her, picked up the thread, explaining the idea's potential with clarity. The session ended in success, though Sophie wanted nothing more than to crawl under the table again. When everyone left, she lingered, head bowed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "You should have," Ethan cut in. "Because of it, I saw a real reaction. And sometimes, chaos creates opportunity." "Are you always this rational?" "Only when I'm trying to hide how I feel." "And right now?" she asked, not daring to meet his eyes. He went quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "Right now, I'm trying not to let myself fall into disorder." That answer, vague as it was, left Sophie speechless. She left the room, her heart racing, not from a technical blunder, but from something deeper taking root. That night, in her tiny rented room, Sophie rewrote her list of unexpected things. "I saved a crucial meeting with a fumble. I ate lunch with the CEO without feeling like I was interviewing. I made him laugh, once, maybe twice, and I'm thinking about him when I shouldn't." She crossed out the last line, then wrote it again, this time in purple ink. Sophie never imagined she'd be invited to a gala, a place of floor-length gowns and wine glasses shimmering under crystal chandeliers. But then Ethan appeared by her desk one Friday afternoon, brief and unexpected. "Tomorrow night, there's a tech council gala. Come with me." "As what?" she asked, not daring to look up fully. "As someone I trust not to let me doze off during a blockchain speech." "Sounds romantic," she teased. "Just functional," he replied, though his eyes weren't cold. The next evening, Sophie stood before the mirror in the event venue's women's restroom. A simple black dress borrowed from her roommate, hair pinned back with 2 cheap clips, and a heart pounding like it was trying to escape. She didn't know what she was doing here, among people speaking the language of multi-million-dollar investments, amid polite smiles and scrutinizing gazes. Ethan met her in the lobby. He wore a black suit, gray tie, and that quiet look of his. But when he saw her, he paused for a single second, and in that moment she knew he truly saw her. "No hoodie today," she joked. "And I'm not heading back to the elevator," he shot back. They stepped into the ballroom, where twinkling lights enveloped the space and classical music rose like a slow wave. Everything followed protocol: handshakes, smiles, nods. Ethan whispered intel in her ear like secret codes. "That one invests in AI. That one funds research institutes. And the one staring at you nonstop is a journalist." "A journalist?" Sophie swallowed hard. Midway through dinner, one of Ethan's longtime partners approached. "You seem different tonight. Who's this?" Ethan glanced at her, unflinching. "Sophie Miller, my companion tonight." "Oh." The partner's eyes seemed to snapshot the entire exchange. After dinner came the dancing. The classical tunes softened into gentler melodies. Ethan extended his hand, no verbal invitation needed. Sophie held her breath and placed her hand in his. She wasn't good at dancing, but he guided her gently, just enough to make her feel like she was floating, not fumbling. They moved under the soft lights, their eyes no longer straying to anyone else. Everything, music, the crowd, unseen constraints melted away in an unnamed embrace, and then a click sounded. An event photographer, faster than her embarrassment, captured the moment. The flash flared like an irreversible marker. Sophie flinched, stepping back. Ethan still held her hand, but his gaze shifted, calm, yet no longer carefree. 2 days later, the photo surfaced in a small column of a finance magazine. The caption read, "Reclusive CEO Ethan Walker spotted with mystery woman at Gala. Who's the one making him smile in the crowd?" Rumors sparked. A few odd glances flickered through the office. The board meeting was scheduled earlier than planned. Sophie could feel the air shift. Ethan retreated into silence. No more handwritten notes, no more lingering looks. And she felt like she'd just stepped into a world unprepared to accept a connection that defied every template. Monday morning, the office still gleamed with its usual polish and precision, but something in the air felt irreparably broken. Sophie sensed it the moment she stepped through the door, not a chill from the air conditioning, but an unnatural silence from the right hallway. No greeting from Ethan, no message, no purple ink note she'd once shyly tucked into her pocket. Helena was the first to speak, her face as icy as ever. "Starting today, send all your reports through me. Mr. Walker wants to redistribute tasks. You're no longer needed in the ideation area." Sophie stood still. "He said that? Really?" Helena nodded, unblinking. His exact words. She nodded back, forcing a smile as if it were just a schedule tweak, but inside her heart cracked with every step back to her seat, the spot Ethan had once jokingly called the chaos control station of a messy angel. By 4 p.m., Sophie couldn't take it anymore. She marched into Ethan's office without knocking. He was there, perfect as always, except his gaze no longer belonged to her. "We need to talk," she said, her voice faintly hoarse. "Not now. It has to be now, because I can't keep standing here every day like a shadow erased from your life." Ethan sighed, shutting his laptop, but he still wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm restructuring the team. Reassigning roles is necessary." "Reassigning or removing?" Sophie shot back, her voice nearly trembling. "Ever since that photo, everything's changed. You've said nothing. You just pulled away. And now you're cutting me out of every meeting." "It's the only way to protect you," Ethan said, his eyes finally meeting hers. Cold, yet torn. "The board's unhappy. The press is asking questions. I can't let this spiral out of control. So, I'm a risk in your report. You're something I didn't account for." Sophie froze. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to vanish. She pulled the employee badge from her neck and placed it on his desk. "If I'm not part of your strategy, then delete me from your system." Ethan didn't react, and that silence was the harshest answer of all. Sophie walked away without looking back. As the door clicked shut behind her, she knew she'd just closed a chapter not just in her job, but in the quiet hope she'd once harbored. That night she walked the long way home. No music, no phone check-ins. The city buzzed as always, but she felt like a faint shadow in the crowd, formless, voiceless, belonging to no one. She paused by an old shop, once a bakery her mother loved. Now it was a dimly lit cafe, and suddenly Sophie understood. Sometimes people can disappear from a place, even if they once belonged there with their whole heart. Sophie never expected to see Ethan again in the small park on the south side of the city, a place she'd often come to sit for hours, watching pigeons squabble over breadcrumbs as if they were the last fragments of a simpler life. She went there on her weariest days, when the past weighed heavy and the future loomed murky. That day the sky was overcast but rainless. She sat alone on a stone bench, her wool cap pulled low over her forehead, hands buried deep in her coat pockets. She thought she was slipping into invisibility once more, until a familiar voice, gentle yet cold like early winter wind, broke through. "Sophie?" She turned and stood there. No crisp suit, just a simple shirt, a tired face, and eyes no longer hiding anything. "Why are you looking for me?" she asked, not standing, not turning away. "Because I need to say what I should have said long ago." "About the job or the photo?" "About everything, but mostly about me." Ethan sat beside her, leaving a gap between them, just enough for all the unspoken silence to linger. A breeze drifted by, light as sorrow yet to turn into tears. "My dad just had a heart attack," Ethan said, his voice low. "I sat alone in my office for 3 hours, not knowing who to call, not knowing who to share it with, and then only one name came to mind." She stayed quiet. "It was you." For the first time his voice trembled, not from the wind but from the cracking of his self-imposed armor. "I was always taught that men don't cry, that a CEO can't show emotion, that a leader has to be cold, strong, precise. And you believed that. I lived by it. Until you came along. You don't follow any rules. You're chaotic, impulsive, honest to the point of disarming people. And you made me realize there's a part of myself I'd buried long ago. The part that feels, that cares." Sophie looked straight at him, eyes glistening but voice steady. "Then why, when things got tough, did you turn away?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid that if I let you stay, I'd lose everything I'd built. Reputation, position, the board's trust." "And did you keep any of it?" "No," he admitted. "I lost you, and everything else became meaningless." The wind stilled. The city seemed to hold its breath with his confession. Sophie turned her face away, but not fast enough to hide the tears streaking across her cheek. "You once said I was something you couldn't account for, but feelings aren't meant to be calculated." "I know," Ethan replied softly, "and I'm not here now to ask for the assistant role back, not to offer some new deal. I'm here as a person, trying to learn how to love without conditions." Sophie said nothing for a while, then she raised her hand, wiping the tear with the back of her coat sleeve. "Are you still afraid?" "Yes, but this time, I'm not letting fear lead the way." "Then," she gave a faint smile, "you can start by sitting here with me a little longer. No explanations, no plans, just being here." Ethan nodded. No more words. They sat like that, side by side. No longer CEO and assistant, no longer opposites, but two people trying to shed their layers to become truer, fuller, and closer to each other. 3 months after their park reunion, Sophie stepped into the main lobby of Walker Tech with a new employee badge around her neck and eyes no longer clouded with uncertainty. She was no longer a temporary assistant, no longer the girl who hid under the table. Officially, she was the director of strategic creativity. In reality, she was the one who transformed the atmosphere of an entire floor, with yellow sticky notes plastered on walls, unreserved laughter, and a trust that didn't need a contract to back it up. Ethan didn't stay cooped up in his office anymore. He often appeared in the creative zone, standing alongside engineers, listening, not judging, not commanding. He'd changed, not because Sophie forced him to, but because he'd chosen it, ever since letting her into his life without a backup plan. One late afternoon, as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the large glass window on the 20th floor, Sophie placed a small chocolate bar on Ethan's desk. Next to it was a handwritten note, "Glucose alert. Careful not to get so serious you forget to smile." He read it and let out a soft smile. No longer a rare occurrence. The walls he'd built around himself had cracked, bit by bit, not from being torn down, but from being touched with gentleness. That evening, in the small kitchen of his apartment, once home only to coffee and a wall-mount schedule, Ethan donned an apron to cook his first dinner. The dish wasn't perfect, but the look in his eyes as he handed Sophie a plate of slightly salty pasta was something inimitable. "You know," he said, "before I met you, everything in my life fit into a spreadsheet, but there wasn't a cell that could hold this feeling." "What feeling?" she asked, tilting her head. The feeling of wanting someone to stay, not for efficiency, not for function, just because they're them. Sophie didn't reply right away. She simply picked up her spoon, took a bite of the salty pasta, and felt her heart flood with things that didn't need names. A week later, they flew to Paris together for a global design conference. In the vast auditorium, as Ethan stood on stage speaking about the resonance between technology and human emotion, Sophie sat in the front row, her eyes never leaving him, not just because he was the CEO, but because she was part of the journey that brought him here, where he was no longer just a leader, but a man who loved with vulnerability and courage. That night, under the golden glow of the Pont Alexandre, Bridge Ethan held her hand amid the breezy Paris air. "There's one thing I never wrote into any strategic plan," he said. "What's that?" "A long-term program called Us." Then he pulled out a small box and opened it, not with grand formality, but with eyes so honest they melted any chance of refusal. "Sophie Miller, will you keep disrupting my life, but this time with the same last name and an official playlist for dinner?" She laughed, tears spilling over her lashes. "Only if you promise never to force me into a spreadsheet." "I promise." "Then it's a yes." They kissed under the lights, in a city that had once been an untouchable dream, and in that moment, everything that had once shattered found its reason to be pieced back together.